How to Win Friends and Influence People is one of the most popular books for building social skills, but can it still be used to make friends and build a community in 2025? Well, I spent the last month reading through and applying its rules in an attempt to find out. As someone with social anxiety and poor social skills, I really do feel like this book helped me be more at ease in social interactions, and it gave me a great set of skills for dealing with people in a professional setting. However, I have observed that this book takes points too extreme sometimes. It doesn't talk about the natural ebb and flow of a conversation, and it doesn't talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. If you took it word for word, you probably come off as too intense. So in this video, I'll point out the sections that I think are worth digging into and those points I think we could probably skip. Welcome to Socially Sprouting, the channel where we tackle social hurdles in order to build the community that we've always dreamed of. Okay, let's get started. So this book is broken down into 4 sections, and we're going to go through each section step by step just because I found certain sections to be more beneficial than others. Hopping right into it, the first section is on the fundamentals, and I think this is the most important section of them all. It is definitely worth a read, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight the main concepts so you can make that call. You're reading this book or watching this video because you want to make a good impression on people. You want them to leave a conversation happy that they talked to you, and hopefully you leave the conversation with that same feeling. So how do we do that? How do we make that good impression? Well, as this section covers, we really only need to ask ourselves one question, and that is, what do people want? The answer to this question is probably the same for you as it is for most people, me included, and that is that we want a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, and a feeling of importance. So this section is all about viewing people with those wants in mind. If we can meet someone's wants, then they'll probably think positively of us. But if we go against their wants, well, you're probably not making a friend that day. Thankfully, Carnegie provides 3 simple rules for this. I'll list them out here just because I think each one holds value, but in future sections, I won't be as granular. I found that by following these, I was more confident, I was less critical of people, and my overall general vibe was better. So let's check out these 3 rules. First, don't criticize people. I know that can be difficult because no one's infallible and we mess up all the time, so shouldn't we be made aware of when we mess up? Well, in most cases, no. Either the person already knows or they're never going to acknowledge it. So by pointing it out, you're just going to hurt that relationship. If you are going to criticize someone, go ahead and weigh the options first as to whether it's worth potentially creating that rift. Secondly, simply show appreciation for people. Appreciation is honest and it comes from the heart, in contrast with flattery, which is fake, so we need to stay away from that. We all love receiving appreciation. However, we definitely don't give enough of it out. And the third rule is to arouse in the other person an eager want. This one definitely comes off as more salesperson-y, but we can definitely apply it in our day-to-day to make social interactions smoother by getting you and the other person on the same page. It's as simple as changing your tactic when trying to get your friend to play that video game with you. Rather than pestering them to play the game with you, do some research and find out what parts of the game they'll be interested in and bring that information to them. Now, rather than reluctantly playing with you, hopefully they'll go ahead and want to play with you and get excited with you. Or you can just apply this to sales because that's definitely what this rule feels tailored to. So overall, I think that the fundamentals section definitely has a lot of value. It certainly helped me, and I think it's worth a read because along with each of the rules, Carnegie also provides abundant examples of how to apply those rules. Okay, on to the next section. This is where it starts to get a little dicey. This section is titled 6 Ways to Make People Like You, and it is definitely the oldest clickbait title I've ever seen. The content itself has some really great value, but it really needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because if you follow it word for word, then you'll be that oddball who asks way too many intrusive questions and smiles too much. I won't go over every point one by one because I don't want to put us all to sleep, but I will hone on some that I think will genuinely help make us friends. So to start with, Carnegie points out 2 simple rules that we can follow, which is just smile and remember people's names. These are easy and win us a lot of points. I will say I really struggle with remembering people's names. Mostly, I just question whether I have the name correct. What's worse than forgetting someone's name is getting their name wrong. So for this, I recommend using a cheat sheet, just as the book does. For example, after speaking with someone new, I wrote down their name and some facts about them. Just the act of writing it down helped me enough that I remembered their name the next time I spoke with them. And it also gave me that little cushion to where if I forgot their name again, I could just reference my little cheat sheet and be on my way. The other points all have the same general theme. Take an interest in people, talk about those interests, and be a good listener. This means not interrupting them. Don't talk nonstop about yourself and don't get distracted. These rules put all of the emphasis on allowing the other person to express what they are most passionate about, allowing them to feel important and feel connected. This is contradictory to how we often approach conversations. Usually, if we want to make a good impression on someone, we try to show them how interesting we are. But this flips the script and shows them that we think that they're fascinating. This is fantastic advice if you really want to come off as friendly. However, I felt that this was a section where the book started to fall apart a little bit. Carnegie puts all of the emphasis on allowing the other person to talk and never says when we should do the talking. He actually has a lot of stories where the example revolves around us never speaking and only allowing the other person to express themselves. This has me concerned for multiple reasons. First, if you don't express yourself and you allow the other person to do all of the talking and they're okay with that, then this is not a healthy conversation and is not going to be a healthy relationship. Secondly, the other person might feel interrogated. Third, if you have social anxiety, you might try to hide behind these rules, which isn't good if you're trying to do like exposure therapy or something. So overall, while I do recommend applying these rules, I also recommend applying restraint. Moving on to section 3. This section is called How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. Yeah, please remember that the name of this book is How to Win Friends, Influence People. This is definitely the section about influencing people. And while it's not bad, it may not be the best for making friends. Its main focus is about handling disagreements and helping people reach conclusions. There are some really great points here that I will highlight, but I am kind of on the fence about a lot of the examples that Carnegie uses here because a lot of them tend to promote unhealthy relationships. So let's touch base on the key takeaways and you can make the call as to whether you want to read the section or not. My recommendation would lean towards taking these key points to heart and then maybe skimming or skipping the stories. Naturally, this section starts out by talking about arguments, and it gives you some good guidelines on how to avoid an argument when you're going into a conversation where you know there will be disagreements. First, no matter what, you should start the conversation in a friendly way and try to view things from the other person's viewpoint. Start off by talking about things that you both agree on. This really sets the stage for a healthier conversation. Then, as the conversation progresses, we should apply the following rules. Admit when we're wrong, don't tell the other person that they're wrong, and avoid an argument at all costs, even if you have to walk away. By admitting that we're wrong, we're proving to the other person that we're honest and trustworthy. It adds validity to what we're saying. However, if we accuse the other person of being wrong, then it just hurts their ego. It goes hand in hand with criticizing someone, and it's really hard to come back from. Even if you do prove that person that they're wrong, well, then that conversation is kind of a lost cause at that point. Now, this is one section I didn't really apply to my life this month because I avoid conflicts like the plague. So I guess I can say I kind of did apply one rule, and that would be avoid arguments at all costs. I think it counts. So overall, while I would give the first two sections maybe an 8 out of 10, I would give this section probably a 6 out of 10. A lot of the points I listed were valid and are very important. However, they were only half of the total points listed in this section. Additionally, some of the stories were very toxic, so that's not something I really want to encourage when you're trying to make friends. For example, one of the stories that was talked about revolved around a diva singer who kept threatening to not perform that evening. The manager had to keep showing up multiple times throughout the day and pat that diva's ego. And Carnegie really promoted that and praised this manager for doing that. But honestly, from my viewpoint, we're trying to make friends, we're trying to build a community, and I can't support someone having to put up with someone who's toxic and having to deal with that kind of person or thinking that that's okay and expected of them. So that's kind of why I'm not a big fan of this story, and that's why I'm leaning towards some of these stories are pretty toxic, and I don't think they're the best for anyone to read. But finally, we have section 4, and the title of the section is Be a Leader, How to Change People Without Giving Offense or Arousing Resentment. You guessed it, I do not like this title at all. Leaders should inspire and guide people, not try to change them. But after reading this section, I can admit that some of the points are about guiding people rather than changing people. And if you are a leader or if you're looking to become a leader, this section could be worthwhile looking through. However, I would probably lean towards suggesting you look for more modern books about this for reasons that you will see very shortly. If you are not a leader, I would just suggest skipping this entire section. Now, I will go ahead and list a few of the points that I really liked from this section. Keep in mind that while I may have liked the point, I may not like the stories associated with that point. This section really starts to highlight that this is a 90-year-old book. The first rule is begin with honest and sincere appreciation, which is totally reasonable. I know when I'm in a meeting with my boss, I like to be told what I'm doing right before I'm told what I need to adjust or change. But Carnegie's first example in this section, right off the bat, was quite extreme. In his story, one of the presidents at the time looked at his secretary and said, "You're a very attractive woman." And then shortly after that, he told her not to get stuck up and that she needed to adjust her punctuation. This was so rude and it almost had me tossing the book, but I did make a commitment here, so here I am still sticking it out. But it's just that was uncalled for and the rudest way to handle that. It is why I do recommend possibly checking out a more modern book on this topic. So, ignoring that, I do have a few other high-level points that I liked. First, draw attention to people's mistakes indirectly. For example, rather than saying that the kid did great on his report card, but he has room to improve in science, you can say the kid did great on their report card and they have room to improve in science. It's still a little bit critical, but it definitely softens the blow. Second, we should praise the slightest improvement. And finally, we should ask questions instead of giving direct orders. I know for myself, I like to feel like I have ownership of something. So if someone gives me suggestions, I'm more likely to go with that versus a direct order. I'm going to kind of push back against that. It's not going to be the greatest. So overall, section 4 was really iffy for me. I would honestly just recommend skipping it and probably finding a book dedicated to leadership if that is what you are going to this section to get. And that's it for this book. Overall, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10. Although I don't have anything to compare it to at this point, so that rating may change down the road. I do think this is a great book on professional communication. If you are trying to pitch your business or sell something or work in corporate, then this really gives you those skills for dealing and networking with people that you may not be interested in dealing with on a personal level. However, for the context of this channel, which is on making friends and building community, it's pretty iffy. While it can provide a good set of foundational skills and give you something to focus on during a conversation, it does not give you a good idea of what a healthy conversation or relationship looks like. And it's not particularly good for people with social anxiety. Furthermore, while the examples included in this book can provide some great context, they can be too extreme and sometimes downright toxic. But if you still insist on reading the book, I would highly recommend reading the first 2 sections. They have a lot of good information. So I hope this helped you gain a high-level understanding of what this book's about. Now you can weigh the pros and the cons and determine if you want to read this for yourself. Please drop any comments below if you have future book suggestions or if you have any comments to make on this specific book. Thank you for joining me here on Socially Sprouting. Bye!